Greetings and welcome to another edition of HFY Storytime with me, your host, the Casual Deathworlder. Before we begin, I'd like to say that I just noticed that we have just passed 600 subscribers on the YouTube channel and just under 60 on the Rumble channel. Those are rookie numbers. You gotta pump those numbers up. So, those are good numbers, but not entirely heartening given the channel's like a year and a half old now. I'd very much like to try and get those numbers up to over 1,000 before the end of the year. So to that end, like this video, comment on this video, and share this video with a friend, a coworker, or whoever you think might like it. Now then, a quick shout out to the Tier 4 patrons, Russ of the Frozen North, Neo5AC, Nick, and Zachary Langmead. Thank you very much. Alright, on deck today we have Terrans will Packbond with anything by user Malice QahWah. Original story link is in the video description. Please make sure you stop by and give the author some love in the form of an upvote or a comment. Thank you very much. Now, on with the story. Belle was a good girl. Belle knew she was a good girl because Darling and Sweetheart called her that. Sometimes they also called her No, Don't Eat That, and other times they called her Belle. Her domain was a humming metal and plastic space filled with lights and noises that she didn't understand but were familiar and home. Often, home was opened and new places were outside where she could go walkies with Darling and Sweetheart. They would fuss around with the plants and bugs while she brought them sticks, rocks, and droppets. One time, she'd brought a droppet into the home and they'd stayed much longer than usual trying to get it back outside. Belle never let on that every time it escaped, she would bring the droppet back inside. It was the best game she'd played in ages. The outside this time had meant wearing her clever girl stuff. She couldn't see as clearly from inside the thing strapped to her face by Darling, and it stopped her from smelling or finding new droppets. But this outside was boring anyways. Just sand and rocks. Her runs were more bouncy than usual too, and she didn't like it. She went back inside the door to home while Darling and Sweetheart collected rocks, and then they all went back inside home properly. Belle enjoyed her life. And crumbs. Belle was woken up by a strange noise one evening, though, when the home lights were dimmed and usually Darling and Sweetheart were asleep in the big bed Belle let them use. Tonight they weren't there, and Belle woke up alone. Home was shaking like it often did before arriving at a new outside, but much more than she'd grown up with. The shaking was wrong in a way Belle knew was bad. She shouted for her people, but they weren't in the room. She pressed her nose to the pad set on the wall just for her to use and ran along the corridor to the outside-in room. Sweetheart was at her lights and making angry noises while Darling was pulling sticks and ropes from under it. Belle leapt over to help, but Darling just shouted, "No!" So Belle sat and watched, because that's the best way to help after being told no. Sometimes no led to crumbs, although Belle didn't think there would be any this time. She grabbed the floor with her paws and curled in her claws when the floor tilted and shook, and she shouted about it. Darling shouted to Sweetheart, and they both leapt on top of Bella, who was surprised but happy. Her people were hugging her. Nothing bad could... Belle woke up in the darkness with a weight resting on her back. It hurt, and she cried for her people, but she couldn't hear them calling her. She wriggled and cried again. Nothing. Distantly, she could hear things that might be droppets, but nothing from her people. She dropped her head and wriggled harder, paws skidding on the floor of home, and she felt the weight on her move and fall. She leapt free. Bruised and confused, she stood on the middle of the outside-in room, looking for her people. It didn't take long to find them. Darling had been the weight on her back. The weight on his back had been a piece of home that had fallen in, and... Bella cried. She nudged him. She shouted at him, then shouted for Sweetheart, who she found next to Darling. Bella cried some more, and then shouted at them. She didn't like this game. The darkness was becoming a faint pink color, and Belle started to be able to see shapes outside of the outside-in room. The outside was really in now. The walls lay broken around her, and there were sticks and rocks everywhere. Some of them were broken, and many of them inside the room with her. She climbed around, sniffing and crying, not sure what to do. Sweetheart and Darling were her people. What was she meant to do if they wouldn't take her through the door for walkies? Belle was a good girl. She trotted through home, which had become strangely shaped and sharp, but she knew what to do about sharp. Her nosepad still worked to open places inside home, and her walkie's box was still clamped beside the door. She patted her paws into the funny walk shoes, and pressed her face into the hated doggles, which grabbed her head with mechanical fingers that only felt a little like Darling's hand. It made her feel a little better anyways. She had to duck under her harness, which grabbed her in squishy arms that reminded her of Sweetheart, and then, fully dressed, she stood at the door. The door didn't have a pad for her nose. It was the door. Only Darling or Sweetheart could open the door. When it failed to open for her glare, she trotted back to the outside-in room. Her people were still there, and still not getting up. Her goggles had rubbed away the ache in her head, and the vents had opened to let her sniff. The medical equipment built into her custom-made harness and helmet were state-of-the-art, the best that two well-funded exploratory scouts had been able to get for their new puppy before setting off on their planned loop around the furthest reaches of known space. They diagnosed Belle's concussion and treated it. Sensors had concluded the air was safe and there were no pathogens harmful to dogs, and opened the vents to let her breathe alien air. The ship's own atmosphere was leaking out of the hole punched through the bridge window, but still largely uncontaminated. But the tiny computer inside the equipment wasn't made to care. Belle sat beside Darling and Sweetheart until the light showed her the big hole where the sticks had come in through the outside-in room. She knew her people weren't going to get back up. They were gone, and that meant she couldn't stay in home any longer. The door had stymied her, but the sticks showed her a new door. It was sharp, but she had her boots on because she was a good girl. She leapt onto the sticks and clambered along them until she was outside. This outside was very different to the most of the past outsides. She could smell and hear droplets everywhere, and the sticks were massive. She jumped off the stick that had ruined home and trotted into the forest. Maybe if Darling and Sweetheart weren't around, she wouldn't have to drop the droplets. Pinnit was running. She was small for her age, but her brother was her responsibility because she was the oldest and she had to look after him, but he was still bigger than her and gone off to explore. She couldn't go back to her parents without him, and she had the vague feeling that there would be worse than just no supper if she let him get eaten by a pack of nargs or fall in a river. So she sat along the faint trail left by her brother's blundering passage through the trees and underbrush, leaping heroically over small rocks and not falling down even though a skinned lower knee was nothing to blub about. She was so relieved when she finally saw him, and ran to wrap her arms around his waist with a gleeful, "Found you!" that she never saw the nargs surrounding the child. "Oh," was all she could muster. Nargs were a favored hunt for the adults. For an adult, a single, or two, or even three nargs were not much of a threat. Even 4 or 5 could be managed if the adult was well-equipped, cunning, and lucky. Around her were 2 hands of the beasts, crouching low and now snarling and snapping at the children. "I'm sorry, Pinnit. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to see the forest like the stories the teller sings. I've never been here before, Pinnit. Please get us away. I'll never be... Ah!" The boy, bigger than Pinnit by half again, was still half her age, so it's on her to pivot him away from the experimental lunge of the hungry narg. She couldn't see, her vision tunneling inwards as her body responded to the situation the only way it knew how. Shutting down. An adult could survive being bitten, even losing a limb. She knew she was too young. The family mothers had explained to her what happened when a youngling was too frightened. A gentle ending, they called it, in a world where life was often painful and short. The family came to the edges of the forest every few years to hunt hard meat and collect the dried nuts and fruits to see them through the next few more years closer to the sea where the better meat was. "Don't worry," they told her. "If something grabs you, the gentle end will carry you away before they start to eat you." She didn't want to end, gentle or otherwise. She didn't want her brother to end, before he even understood what was happening to him as he relaxed and whispered, "What eats nargs?" She wanted to reply, "Adults hunt them," but she was too weak now, her legs folding twice under her as she settled with her brother on the soft leaf litter of the forest floor. Something massive hurtled past her face, barely making her nose switch, and blood, the deep purple of narg blood, splattered her face. She was almost asleep when something roughly pressed against her cheek. Whatever it was felt soft and spongy, but also supple and wet and horribly cold. It startled her out of her fugue, and she squeaked. The prowling shape of something massive moving past her nearly put her under again, but her brother's startled squeak got her attention, and as the head of the beast circled around her other side, she tried to back away, with herself between her brother and the new threat. Its massive head was splattered with Narg blood. It had fur. She could make out that the thing's coat was matted and dirty, but under the pelt was muscle and power. Behind it, she could see a swaying shape swinging to and fro, attached to its rump? Pinnit wasn't sure. The animal was utterly different to anything she'd seen in her short life. Its legs were built similarly to her own, but it only had a single knee. It was furred like she was, but it had that leathery wet patch on its face at the end of a huge mouth full of sharp teeth which shone whitely in the sun. But above all that were a pair of the softest-looking brown eyes she had ever seen. They looked like a pair of her own people's eyes, and the familiarity amidst the alien made her cry. The swaying behind the creature stopped, and it sat down and cried back. Her brother, recovered from his stupor and fright, reached out from behind her. The beast lifted one of its huge clawed feet and placed it gently on her brother's outstretched hand. Belle was a good girl. She knew she was a good girl because Pinnit and Biffit called her good girl. Well, it felt like good girl when they said it, and gave her crumbs. The family called her good girl too, but only a little warily, and gave her crumbs by standing back and throwing them. But after Belle caught a whole bunch of droppets and was allowed to eat a droppet and wasn't called, "No, don't eat that," for doing it, they started to give her ear scratches and brushes. Terran Alliance First Contact Recovery Vessel, by mistakes we learn, after action report. Brief. Recovery of the missing scout vessel was conducted in orderly fashion. The local sapients observed our activity from a reasonable distance. When approached by what appeared to be an elder of a nomadic tribe indigenous to the area, we made contact in order to ascertain the extent of the contamination from their explorations of the crash. The elder, a female named Pinnit, showed us around. As it transpired, the locals largely revered the crash site, not for the wreck itself, but for a local legend centered around it. They led us to the grave sites of the Jamesons, which they explained were recovered from the wreck after the friend came. They left it alone otherwise, saying the items from there made the great friends sad. After some careful probing, we discovered the great friend living amongst the tribe about 10 kilometers away from the crash site. A healthy golden retriever approaching 12 years old. In the interests of diplomacy and not breaking the hearts of every single member of that tribe, we gave her a health checkup to install the latest generation of longevity and rejuvenation treatments and left her in place. Whole planet is nothing but trees and squirrels, and we felt that someone should stay behind to represent Terra. A full debrief is expected on return to Terran space. Johann Merkensoft, Captain, TAN, by mistakes we learn. End of story. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, please smash those like and subscribe buttons and share this video with a friend. And, as always, a huge shout out to my editor, Greygor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. Okay, I guess the question for the day would be, how are you all liking the HFY Storytime venue? Leave your answers in the comments below. Until next time, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye.